Здравствуйте, дорогие наши слушатели. Сегодня мне хочется представить вам удивительного гостя. Это глава племени Чероки Nation, который был главой нации Чероки более 10 лет. И сегодня нация Чероки насчитывает 450 тысяч человек по всему миру и является самым большим племенем в США. Чад много сделал для своего племени, развивая его экономику, здравоохранение, поддерживая язык, возрождая культуру. Он автор нескольких книг. Hi, Chad. Thank you very much for this interview, for this opportunity to have to talk with you and to have you on our channel. It's a great honor for us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
In 2005, you and your wife visited Buryatia. Can you tell us, please, what was the purpose of your visit and what were your impression after this trip?
We first met a delegation of Buryad people in Oklahoma, United States, at our capital, which is Tahlequah. I was principal chief, which is comparable to a governor or a president. And they came and they were studying how we were revitalizing our Cherokee language. We had established an immersion school, so they toured the immersion school. And they were very warm, congenial people. They looked a lot like American Indians, particularly those from the Southwest. We would laugh with them saying, "You look like Navajos." And we really enjoyed their presence. And so some months later, we were offered an invitation to come to visit them on a cultural exchange. And so we did so. And it was just a delightful experience. I'd never traveled to Russia before. And it was a long trip. And we ended up in Ulan-Ude. And it was, it's just, they were very warm and kind and hospitable. But I could see parts of history I had never had a glimpse of before. When I was real little, like in 7 or 8 years old in grade school, that was during the Cold War. And I always wondered, were the Russian people that different than us? And I always questioned that, if they were. And that was the only place when I was growing up, that I wanted to visit was Russia, to see if all the conflict that I'd been told about was real or not. So having the opportunity to go and visit was very enlightening for me.
Thank you. I have read that one of your biggest achievements was that you succeeded at nurturing the spirit of unification for the common good, called Gadugi, right?
Yes.
Could you please tell us more about it? How it was possible?
Well, there's sort of a fun saying, if you have 2 Indians together, you'll have 3 opinions. So they're extremely diplomatic, they're extremely democratic. And in fact, the US Constitution was based upon the Iroquois Confederation, which was a consortium of about 8 tribes in the Northeast United States. And there had not been a practicing effective democracy in the world at that time. So the United States, with Benjamin Franklin, modeled the United States government to some degree after the Iroquois Confederation. And Cherokees are related to them biologically. And so when I was in office, we always had political differences. But the idea with Gadugi and the things that are embedded in our native language, it teaches us how to treat each other with respect, with honor. And so the idea that we were able to create some combined forward movement was to create a 100-year plan. And the idea is that we could have a focus to where we wanted to go. Because we could see in history 100 years ago where we were, and history always repeats itself. For us, it always repeats in terms of 10 years, in terms of 20 years, and sometimes in terms of centuries. And I'm reminded I was at a community meeting with our people, and I said, was talking about this 100-year plan. And somebody in the audience raised their hand and they said what was on their mind, which was great. And they said, well, why have a 100-year plan? We won't even be here then. As soon as that person said that, everybody in the room understood instantly. That's exactly why you have a 100-year plan. Because we won't be, but who will? Our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. So to answer your question, if you can create a joint vision, you can navigate the differences between people and policy much easier. The American Indian tribes have the unique status of being dependent domestic nations. So they have sovereignty. It's somewhat limited. We live within the United States and we will live within the boundaries of states, but we still have autonomy over lots of issues. It's basically reserved sovereignty. But internally, to create this long-term vision, and what you're saying about clarifying that so that you can focus on everyday issues. I was in office for about 2 years, and we debated many, many times as to what is the purpose of the Cherokee Nation. You know, there's got to be some purpose. My great-great-grandfather, Redbird Smith, said that we were endowed with intelligence, we're loyal, we're industrialists, but we were overlooking that particular mission on Earth because no people are endowed with these qualifications without a design purpose. So I asked, what is our design purpose as a tribe, as a tribal nation? It took about 2 years and it finally dawned on us. It's real simple. It's like one of those epiphanies. The purpose of the tribe is to become a happy and healthy people. That's it. Become a happy and healthy people. So everything we did during my administration was focused on that. Law enforcement, education, healthcare, industrial assembly, gaming, hospitality. It had to be aligned to just accomplish an ultimate goal of becoming happy and healthy people. So I'll just give you one example. Law enforcement. It's a paramilitary kind of organization. And so what's the purpose of law enforcement? You could have SWAT teams and water rescue teams, and you could, get a bunch of guns. And that's one way to do it. But the other way is to say, it really should be a community policing effort. The police should become friends and part of the communities. Be able to be there to talk to kids and to go to events and make themselves part of the community. And so if your driver is to become a happy and healthy people, you don't go out and buy a bunch of assault rifles. You have your police to go to local events, visit people in their homes, walk the streets, help kids find their way. So instead of investing in guns, you invest in counseling and social services. Well, it's a great question because United Nations had a declaration called the UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. And of, 200 countries signed on to that declaration. And the United States was one of the last to do so. And so that Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is something that's shared with all the tribes in the United States, with the indigenous people of South America, Mexico, every place in the world. There's a commonality. And so I'm sure Russia's not endorse that, but that is really a good articulation of the commonality of indigenous people. Well, the overarching organization, it's a voluntary organization in the United States for tribes, is the National Congress of American Indians. Mm-hmm. We have helped organize policy that was brought by the United States Congress and such. And that'd be a really good conduit for cultural exchanges and to be able to support the Buryats and in exchange at their annual conferences with your people, having seminars and such. Yeah, I think the National Congress of American Indians would be able to do it.
Chad, you have been highly successful as a chief of the Cherokee Nation, improving its economy, education, and helping revive its culture. And Buryatia now is in difficult situation, struggling with poor economy, young people fleeing our country, and dying language. Which advice would you give to us?
When we started our language immersion school, we had maybe 5,000 people who could speak Cherokee fluently, and they were all over 50 years old. So basically it was a dying language. So we started an immersion school. So when the children 4 years old walked in, they spoke nothing but Cherokee from that day forward. They'd go home and speak English, and they would come back, and it became a successful program. And their parents did not speak Cherokee, but usually the children's grandparents did. And we kept trying to figure out, how could you keep this school going? Because these kids, they lived in a community where all their cousins and neighbors and stuff spoke English, and so they were discouraged at times from going back to the immersion school and speaking Cherokee and learning a second language. And it finally dawned on us, the success of the program, the success of the immersion school, was because parents loved their children, and they wanted their children to have something that they never had. And that something was a sense of identity, great intelligence, and would allow them to be better people. So I could go through the list of young folks that have graduated from that program. In fact, one of them, she's 18 years old. I think yesterday was her birthday. She lives in Poland, and their home was not far from the Ukraine border. And for some period of time, she went and volunteered and helped with the refugee children. And so my advice is that for indigenous communities, the things that bind them together and make them strong is that generational love that's just passed on from grandparent to parent to child. And if you can coalesce around that that humanistic, almost universal feeling, things will start to work out after some period of time. That may be too simple, but that's why the immersion school was successful. And governments can actually do that, design themselves to get the results they want. You know, here in the United States, we have a phenomenon that I would never thought I would live to see. And they're ultra-right conservatives that support former President Trump. And it's just incredible. They've basically been indoctrinated, and they follow that. But you know, I have one brother who believes that every 30 to 40 years there's a change in world consciousness. And so we're hoping that, you know, over the next decade or such, the generation that's coming up, my kids or grandkids, can embrace a more humanistic, healthy way to look at our country and our institutions in the world. And so it may be that the older generation has to fade away before the younger folks can bring something better. It's sort of sad to say, but here in the United States, I think that's what's going to have to happen, is that the Trumpers, as we call them, they just fade away. Yes.
Wow. Strange.
Pretty sobering, but yes.
It's so strange.
I can't explain it. It's just that they just see how there's some John Wayne, you know, macho guy that, and they believe he's a victim. I mean, for Trump, and I get off in this digression, but he really draws people to him because of his playing the victim. I think that must hit a chord with a lot of those folks because they see themselves as a victim or not. Well, I can say what you're talking about. Fortunately, here in the United States, none of that comes through. It's really the mercenaries, the Wagner group, and what's been portrayed is generally the Russian army is many times inept. They're willing to sacrifice lots of people who keep calling the Russian soldiers fodder. So like just rush the troops in for their own deaths. And so it's, I think, you know, the vast majority of Americans just cannot understand Putin's desire to wage a war where the target is civilians, because we see every day the shelling and bombing of residential apartment buildings and such. So I don't know what kind of perspective we're getting, because what we get through almost all the media is that, you know, Ukraine is fighting a noble fight. Zelensky is quite the hero here. And the idea of Buryads never show up. It's too finessed. It's just, there's almost a sympathy for Russian soldiers because they're believed to be taken away from their their parents and thrust into war they knew nothing about and have no control over. And so the Buryat, how they're portrayed is not an issue in the United States. But, to change that image, if it ever to show up in the United States, I would just suggest a glimpse of what we saw when we went to Ulan-Ude. We went out to a group of Buryat folks to their rural village, and it was like a ranch in Montana. And the Buryat folks, they were quite pleased to show us their horses and their horsemanship and let us ride their horses, and the environment looked like Montana. And there was a priest, and I'm not sure what you called him, but he took us to this top of this hill and had a monument. He was saying these were actually monuments of their religion, but they were disguised as Russian monuments during some period of time so they wouldn't be destroyed. And he was the most delightful person. He wore the orange robe. He reminded me of my uncle, the calm, dignified, handsome presence. And it was so funny. And all of a sudden we're out there in the middle of it, seemed like no place, up on this hill, and all of a sudden a cell phone rings. And we kept looking around, who in our group has a cell phone that would reach out here? And he pulls up his robe and pulls out a cell phone. He says, "Excuse me, I'm going to talk to my son who's in Montana." It was just amazing, to show the commonality of how Buryats live and how they are just like our people is amazing. In fact, one of the first nights we were in Ulan-Ude, we went to a ballet. Excuse me. And I think out of the cast of 12, 8 were Buryat people. And it was just really impressive. So that kind of showing, if it ever became an issue in the United States, would quickly dispel that stereotype that the indigenous people are the cause of the monstrosities committed in the Ukraine.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we have very good theater, opera and ballet theater in Ulan-Ude.
It was impressive. I mean, when I got there, I learned that it had been a military production facility in World War II. And what was so striking is that the Russian apartment buildings, real tall buildings, they all looked the same. They're pretty bleak. And then in between them, you would have the Buryat little houses, wooden houses. And it was pretty interesting. And one of our translators, a young man, he liked automobiles, and he found that I liked automobiles too. And there was a vehicle that stopped production in the 1960s. It was called a Studebaker. He knew all about Studebakers because there were actually also a World War II vehicle, and they still had some in Buryatia. And so it's just amazing the commonality and the different interest that you could show with Americans that would ingratiate you to them.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this great interview. Thank you.
My pleasure. And good luck with your sovereignty and your survival.